Well, this is my final greeting to you. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, my lovely students. This is it for the semester. Last lecture, lecture 17. I hope some of you are sorry. I imagine many of you are ready to move on with your life, but if there's one thing this class should have taught you is to live in the moment. So let's live in the moment with Sturdivant one more time, baby. How's that sound? And great topic, like always. This is the Aztecs and the Incas. Two amazing civilizations, Mesoamerican civilizations that were at their prime when the old Spaniards arrived and did a number on them. So savor this lecture, people. It's been wonderful teaching you this semester. Okay, let's embark. So we have 4 essential questions for this lecture about the Aztecs and Incas. And the first one is, where were these civilizations, the Aztecs and Incas, located? Number 2 is, when did these civilizations evolve? The third is, what are some common characteristics of each of these civilizations? And finally, when and why did these civilizations end so abruptly? Before I talk about the Aztecs and the Incas individually, I want to talk about them briefly collectively because they both experienced the same fate to a large extent. The Aztecs and Incas were highly developed civilizations that were destroyed by the Spanish in the 1500s. The conquest was a terrible Holocaust. Now, when I think of the Holocaust, I immediately think of what Adolf Hitler did to the Jewish people in Europe in World War II, which was catastrophic, devastating. But I want to lay a statistic on you right now that should really make you impressed in a negative way. 90% of the Aztecs were killed when the Spaniards arrived in the early 1500s. 90%. Now, obviously, I have to give some reason for that. And this is true of both the Incas and the Aztecs. They were both done in by military technology the Spaniards had that they didn't have, primarily guns. I mean, you have to understand that Mesoamerica is a time capsule. I mean, Mesoamerica was pretty much unchanged for thousands of years because they had no interaction with the outside world. So in came these white, hairy guys with these long beards that had guns. So they had muskets, they had crossbows, and they also had these incredible animals with them that the Mesoamericans had never seen. Horses and bull mastiffs, these massive, fierce dogs that they would unleash on the Native Americans, which would had to be terrifying. But the thing that really did a number on both civilizations was disease, smallpox. It's one of those things where, you know, the Spaniards basically beat the Mesoamericans by breathing on them. But one thing I want you to understand also is that not all Mesoamericans were upset by the arrival of the Spaniards. In the movie Apocalypto, in the podcast that we're going to listen to about the Aztecs, they weren't nice to their neighbors. So if someone else comes and arrives, it's like World War II, when the United States has this alliance with the Soviet Union to defeat Hitler. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And when it came to the Spaniards arriving, many Mesoamericans were glad they came because they could destroy the hated Aztecs or the hated Incas. So the Spaniards were very effective at gaining alliances with local tribes who couldn't stand these people. Most of what we're going to learn about the Aztec Empire is going to be from our podcast next week, which is on the fall of Tenochtitlan when the Spaniards arrived. But I want to give you a little background on the civilizations that came before the Aztecs. Not a lot, but just a little bit about how the Aztecs came about. Now, one thing you have to understand is the Aztecs are from northern Mesoamerica. In what is today Mexico City, it's a very different environment than the Yucatan Peninsula where the Mayans lived. That's rainforest. Mexico City is actually about a mile above sea level, so it's a more arid place, a higher place, a cooler place. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but there's lots and lots of similarities. Now, the first great, well, obviously the Olmecs came first in central Mexico, but the first great civilization that we can talk about is this city called Teotihuacan, which was dominant from about 200 to 900 CE, about the same time as the golden age of the Mayans. The thing that they did that was so important, just like the Mayans, is they figured out this concept of agricultural productivity. And very similar to the Mayans with their raised beds for farming, they had something called chinampas, which they would actually take a swampy area or a lake and build this little island that was incredibly fertile and grow crops on it. Something else you see with Teotihuacan is the emergence of this fascinating god called Quetzalcoatl, who is the combination of bird and snake. And he is the god of agriculture and the arts. And you also see Teotihuacan is obsessed with human sacrifice, which is just going to get amplified with each succeeding civilization. So you may have heard of this concept of sibling rivalry. It's where you have an older brother you're trying to emulate. You know, you're in competition with them, but in many ways you want to be just like them. And the Aztecs had an older brother. They're called the Toltecs. And they had tremendous influence on the Aztecs, although the Aztecs ended up destroying them. Hallelujah. That's crazy. But first of all, I want you to take a look at this map, because I have a hard time figuring this area out. I think that this is complicated. So I wanted to show you this map as a form of reference and some type of guidepost or to get your bearings. So if you look here, I'm going to point out the city of Teotihuacan, which is the predecessor of the Toltecs. And then the Toltecs are going to be headquartered in this city called Tula, which is right next door. And then finally the Aztecs are going to be at a place called Tenochtitlan, which is right next door. So all these civilizations came in rapid succession in a very small area. The Toltecs, they're interesting because they are, the Aztecs copied them almost identically. They're going to be empire builders. And if you see, they even controlled the areas all around central Mexico and even extended into the Yucatan Peninsula. So they were empire builders. They built off or evolved off the agricultural productivity of Teotihuacan, but they added this concept of warfare is religion. Going to war is a religious act. This is a civilization unlike or similar to the Spartans in ancient Greece, which elevated warfare to the whole reason to exist. And they loved conquering territories, they loved acquiring land, and they loved sacrificing people, baby. That was their primary method of making the world go round. And the Aztecs are going to copy that big time. And the people that the Toltecs conquered did not like them. Did not like them at all. Now, right around 1200, from about 900 to 1200, the Toltecs were dominant, but they lost their territories in the Yucatan Peninsula, and they were eventually destroyed as well. So the Toltecs are going to be the people that the Aztecs idealized. They controlled central Mexico after the fall of Teotihuacan, but their rule, their dominance was rather short-lived, and they were ultimately destroyed by their little brothers, the Aztecs. Now, I'm not going to talk very much about the Aztecs because most of the information you're going to get on the Aztecs is from the podcast that we're going to do next week. But I want to go back to that map for just a minute. I want to show you this city called Tenochtitlan. And Tenochtitlan is right in the middle of Lake Texcoco. So what the Aztecs did was amazing. Just an amazing feat of civil engineering when they built this city called Tenochtitlan, which is right in the middle of this lake. Now, once again, I'm not going to talk a great deal about them. Just understand that they idolized the Toltecs and built on their concept of war as a religious act. You can see on the map the yellow areas represent the extent of the Aztec Empire. And just like the Toltecs, they conquered territory and then just exploited the crap out of this territory. There's a couple phrases, a couple words I want you to be aware of. They created a highly organized civilization. The Aztecs ran the show. Now, I like to think of the Aztecs similar to the Spartans in ancient Sparta. This was a class of warrior elite, and the same thing was true in the Aztec civilization. And this warrior elite was called the Altepetl. The Altepetl. And these guys ran the show, and when the Spaniards arrived in 1521, they're just going to be absolutely astounded by what they saw in the Aztec Empire. More on the Aztecs in that podcast. Okay, so get this. My voice might sound just a little different right now. And the reason for that is because I tried to record this last segment in my room, and then the announcements came on, and then the bell rang, and then the custodian came in, and then another teacher came in, so I just got mad and left. So right now I'm sitting in my car recording this last part on my iPhone. So if I sound different, that's why. But I'm in this quiet place right now. I'm sitting in the parking lot recording this. How strange is that? And what's odd about it is this is the last segment of the last lecture of the year. And here I am sitting in my car doing it. So go figure. Now, I do feel like I'm not doing the Incas justice. And in regard to that, we're going to listen to a podcast on the Aztecs, and we're going to read something on the Incas. So I'm not going to just diss them that much, but I don't feel like I'm doing them justice. But I'm just going to give you just some basics about Inca civilization to set the reading up. And what you see there is a map of South America. And the Andean civilizations refers to civilizations that thrived in the Andes Mountains. And you have to understand just how incredibly foreboding these mountains are. I mean, we're talking about some of the highest mountains in the world. Mount Aconcagua, the highest Andes, is 23,000 feet. I mean, that's 3,000 feet higher than Denali up in Alaska. So that's really impressive. And I'm going to highlight just some of the early civilizations here. The first one is Mochi, which would be in modern-day Peru, and this is a civilization that thrived between 200 and 700 CE, which is the same time that the Mayans thrived in the Yucatan Peninsula. And then down here by this fascinating lake called Lake Titicaca, which is 12,000 feet high. When I say Lake Titicaca, man, my freshmen just explode with laughter. They just love that name. Lake Titicaca is in modern day, it straddles Bolivia and Peru, but on the southeastern corner or shore of Lake Titicaca was a civilization that was centered around the city called Tiahuanaco from 500 to 1,000. But these Mochi and Tiahuanaco, these were not big empires. The big empire is going to come later. Now, if you look at the Lake Titicaca, in the northwest corner along the shore there is a city called Cusco. Now, in the early 13th century, 1200 so, this city called Cusco became more prominent. Now, I want you to think of Cusco like ancient Rome. It's a city that's going to grow in importance and significance rapidly, and a lot of the characteristics you apply to ancient Rome, you could apply to the Inca Empire. Very similar to, you could say the Greeks were like the ancient Mayans. So there was a tribe of people called the Incas, and it's interesting how they can trace this exactly. In 1438, the Incas are going to go on a roll. thanks to a leader called Pachacuta Inca. And love his nickname. He was called the Earth Shaker. And he is going to rapidly expand Inca control, and this control is going to go over a wide swath of territory. And understand, this isn't like moving through Europe. This is like going over top of gargantuan mountains. So he is going to start acquiring territory, building an empire, expanding Inca control, and they're going to do something. They're going to create a situation where those they conquer benefit from the expansion, just like the Roman Empire. So here's what happens. The big thing about the Andes Mountains is you want to try to foster transportation between various climate zones. So you might travel 8 miles as the crow flies, and you might be in an entirely different climate zone thanks to elevation. And these different climate zones could produce different types of agricultural products. So up in the higher elevations, you're getting potatoes. In the mid regions, you're going to have livestock, and down in the coastal regions, you're going to have sugar and fruit and more warm weather crops. So here's what the Incas did. They would expand into a territory and then set up a system of tribute called the mita. A system of tribute is where you pay taxes in exchange for protection. But these tax dollars bought them something very valuable in addition to protection: transportation facilities. In other words, when the Incas came in and conquered you, they put in great infrastructure, and all of a sudden, your standard of living went up. So you can see why people accepted Inca rule. That's so important. And they built transportation facilities that were truly magnificent that you're going to read about next week. So this is interesting. Pachacuta Inca went out on his roll in 1438. Just 100 years later, the Spaniards arrived. And just like with the Aztecs, they had some tremendous advantages. Their military technology was far advanced to the Incas, just like the Aztecs. I mean, the Incas didn't have guns. They didn't have crossbows. And so when the Spaniards arrived, they were just able to outgun them. Small number of men were able to defeat a large Inca force. Something else they had exotic animals as far as the Incas were concerned. Horses and bull mastiffs. Oh my gosh, I'd hate to be chomped by a bull mastiff. Just like with the Aztecs, they breathed on the Incas and got them sick with diseases from Europe that they had no natural immunity to. And finally, just like the Aztecs, there were people that surrounded the Incas that didn't like them. Now, the hatred wasn't as intense as the hatred that people surrounding the Aztecs had for them, but there was jealousy, there was hatred, and they were able to. The Spaniards were good at working allies against native peoples, and the sad part is almost all native peoples suffered as a result of the Spanish diseases that they brought over. So not many Mesoamericans benefited from the Spanish arrival, except those, I guess, that were going to get sacrificed. So people, that is it. It's been my great pleasure to do these lectures for you, and at this point, I'm signing off for the semester. Now, we still have some work to do, but this is the last one you'll hear. If you get lonely for Sturtevant this summer, just put on one of these lectures on YouTube. I guarantee you'll go right to sleep. Take care, my friends.